The Center for Teaching and Learning is showcasing faculty innovations in and out of the classroom, and we're trying to create a space where faculty members can share ideas and learn from each other's experiences. This is one of a series of informal conversations where we ask the faculty member to describe and demonstrate their innovative practices. We'll definitely have some time for questions at the end of the conversation, and you can also post questions in the chat as we go along. Today, we're speaking with Colleen Kirk, Associate Professor in Management and Marketing Studies in the School of Management. Colleen started at New York Tech in fall 2016. Before joining New York Tech, she was an assistant professor of marketing at Mount St. Mary College in Newburgh. She moved to New York Tech, really, to join an AACSB accredited school that was more research oriented. Colleen's taught most of the marketing courses we offer here. Most often she teaches in the MBA program, marketing research, consumer behavior, and new product marketing. She has a professional background in marketing in the technology industry. Colleen loves involving students in her research, and she does so as much as possible. She studies consumer behavior and focuses especially on how consumers develop psychological ownership of products and its implications. Welcome, Colleen.
Thanks, Fran. So glad to be here. Thank you so much. Quite an honor to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Which courses are your favorite ones to teach? What's your absolute favorite course to teach?
Well, I enjoy teaching really almost every course. Okay, my students might know that, but marketing research is probably my very favorite, and I'll tell you why. So a number of years ago, a colleague at another institution told me not to teach marketing research before I got tenure because the students find the course so difficult. And he's a superb teacher. He's quite remarkable and has been helped me a lot. But at the same time, he told me that he found it to be his most rewarding course to teach because students tell him it has the greatest impact on their ability to find a job after they graduate. And so this has been my experience also. Students find it really demanding. It's a hard course. And but many students have come back to me after the class is over to tell me that they got their job or their internship because of this class. In the course, the students choose their own project topic, and we work on it all semester, and they apply the most current, qualitative and quantitative techniques and software to their research problems. So they end up with some really substantial skills that they can go then, and a solid project that they can talk about with prospective employers. And I think that's why they come back to me and say those kind of things, and that's why it's rewarding to me. I can't
Look
hear
at that.
you, Fran.
Now I'm not muted. I was muted. If you think back on your own time as a student, is there a teacher that you had who really changed your approach to teaching? Or is there a student you've had who's changed your approach?
Oh, definitely. Oh, my students always change my approaches to my teaching. So, and I'm always grateful to them for that. So my colleagues also, have been influential in helping me through the years, including the fantastic teachers we have here at New York Tech. And before I really answer this, I'm going to give you a specific example, okay? But before I answer this, I also want to say how much I have appreciated the Center for Teaching and Learning. We didn't have one at my prior institution, and it is a remarkable asset at our college. And so I just want to, give you a shout out for that. I can be happy to talk about, the many things, okay? But I think I'll focus, and I'm happy to talk about those at another time, the many ways that the Center for Teaching and Learning helps me. But I'll give you a specific example of a student who was instrumental in changing my approach to teaching, because that's what you really asked for. So It was actually at a prior institution, okay? It was my very first semester as a full-time faculty member at my prior institution, which was a liberal arts college. And I was teaching the freshman Introduction to Marketing class. And I had 40 students in the class, and there was a small group of students in the class that was intent on disrupting the class at every opportunity. They must have known I was vulnerable as a first-time full-time faculty member. And I felt like I was doing more crowd control than teaching. And my course evaluations at the end of the semester were not very good. It was quite striking and upsetting, as you can probably imagine. So after that, I read all I could about the situation. I knew that it had a lot to do with this, my challenges in trying to control the class. And so so I did a lot of reading, and the next semester I implemented a new technique I learned about establishing a psychological contract on the very first day of class. And as a side note, I'm now studying psychological contracts in my research with consumers. But anyway, that's a different thing. But I'd be happy to share the technique in more. Sorry, go ahead.
What is a psychological contract?
Okay, well, if we have a moment, I'll tell you the actual technique, okay, in summary, and I'm happy to provide anybody any more details if anybody wants, okay? But it had a big impact on my future teaching of freshman courses. And so what it is the first day of class, you start out with two questions. Before I even go through the syllabus, I go through this exercise for about 20 or 30 minutes with the students on the very first day of class, and only for freshmen, okay? You don't need it for MBA students, obviously, or upperclassmen even. But I say to them, I put up on the board, okay, or in PowerPoint or chat or whatever it is you're using, and I say, what makes a good teacher or a good professor? And so the students come down, they're all excited, right? Oh, why they're being, asked their opinion, and come up with things like, they're prepared, and they're empathetic, and they come up with these lists of things that they think are brilliant teacher. And then I put a second column and I say, what makes a good student? And we go through the same thing, and lo and behold, we find there's an enormous, almost exclusive, entire overlap between the two columns. And so then they come to see that I tell them, my contract with you is that I will do my very best to be the best teacher for you I can be, and I ask you to do the same. And and then it has always worked, and I stick to it. And because we have this contract up front, the students respond better to me. But I also feel much more comfortable and confident in asking a student to leave the class if need be. So, yeah.
Nice, thank you.
I hope that's helpful.
It is. I'd like to, should I say pivot? I'd like to steer the conversation to what happened a little over a year ago. So how did you feel back in March 2020 when, on a dime, we had to switch to remote teaching? And I should actually, before I even ask you that question, I just want to point out, in case some of the people in this conversation are not aware, Colleen actually had piloted teaching on Zoom a year before, 2 years before?
Yeah, about a year before. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I'm just going to stop there and turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it, Fran. It was that working with Noreen and Fran, I had piloted a Zoom class a year before, and I was thinking to myself, wow, New York Tech is really advanced, which we were, right? We were one of the first institutions in the country to start teaching in Zoom, so we were way ahead of the game, enormously. I'm sure all of our faculty members realize that they have people, colleagues at other institutions, how lost our colleagues at other institutions were, whereas we were way ahead of the game as an institution. So anyway, it really felt quite comfortable for me, actually, because I had already taught an entire course in Zoom. And I've always loved technology. I come from the tech industry, so professionally, and was teaching online, back in the 1990s. So it was all good for me. I didn't, not to say there aren't huge problems, okay, and huge challenges, but I was comfortable with it. Yeah.
One of the things I remember was you switched to teaching on Zoom what would otherwise have been a class in the distance learning video conferencing classrooms.
Yes.
Right? So
yes.
You went from having some students in the room with you and others on a screen far, far away to having everyone on Zoom. And I remember so clearly a conversation with you where you were talking about how much more equitable it was to have everyone, yourself included, in the same size box on the screen at about the
Yes.
same distance.
Yes, exactly, Fran. We were actually talking about this in a faculty meeting today in the School of Management. We're talking about course delivery modes and things like that. And we were actually talking about that. And I think most of my colleagues feel the same way, that Zoom is more equitable. Yeah, exactly. And we actually did a survey also in the School of Management of our graduating students, I believe it was, or in any event, we have had about 70 or 80 students respond, so pretty decent sample size. And they strongly and significantly preferred Zoom over DL. So we can definitely say, I would feel very comfortable saying that Zoom is preferable. Now, we're all kind of tired of Zoom, so, but yes, definitely has some pros to offer, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So once you switched to that, what did you do differently than compared to when you were in the classroom, right? What did you do differently to engage the students and keep them active?
Yeah. So, right, that does take a bit of getting used to, right? So first of all, I guess I would say that there have been some things about Zoom teaching that actually have made teaching easier. So let me just start with that, okay? Even though we're all tired of Zoom in a lot of ways, right? But examples of this are like having Zoom create randomized breakout rooms. And that's so fantastic, because in DL courses or even physical courses, right, trying to get students to like connect and meet for impromptu assignments in the classroom with somebody they don't know is really almost impossible, right? It's a lot of work in any event. And whereas on Zoom, it's a piece of cake, right? You just click the randomized breakout session button and off they go. So I find that doing that early in the semester, right at the beginning for several classes, and doing it several times with several low stakes types of assignments or think, pair, and share types of things, it's a great way for students to get to know each other before they have to pair up, in major group projects with more implications for their grades. So that's one thing, one advantage to Zoom technology. The Zoom, keeping the video on, is always, right, we all encourage that. I don't mandate it, but I certainly encourage it. But it's an issue, of course. We have students even from all over the world, and sometimes, from either it's 2 o'clock in the morning for them sometimes when they're in one of my classes, or they just don't have the bandwidth to do it. So that's an issue. But other things I do, the breakout rooms are fantastic. I do make good use of the breakout rooms. I also use the discussion boards a lot, to help students prepare in advance for classes. So as an example, we had Betty Hudson, who is a strategic communications executive, has an enormous history and background and career in communications. And she's on our New York Tech Women's Technology Council. And she came to my consumer behavior class last week, in our MBA consumer behavior class. And so I asked the students to post marketing challenges for her, to discuss ahead of time in the discussion board, and I sent them to her. And so we had a fantastic interaction in class where the students were showing them showing her some of the problems, and she was kind of addressing some of the issues. So it was great. I do that kind of thing a lot with my students. Using Canvas now, the discussion boards to help them prepare ahead of time. I also use, I don't know how much you want to hear. I don't want to talk everybody's ear off. I do have a couple of other, yeah, okay, one more. All right, so well, one of my favorite things to do, and everybody I'm sure has developed their own techniques, and I'm sure mine is probably very backwards, but it works. I go in and out of editing mode in PowerPoint. So I add blank slides, like every 2 or 3 slides, I'll add blank slides or a discussion question or something. And so that way, as I go into editing mode so that I can write down the comments that they're making. So it becomes really like a whiteboard, and that, works pretty well actually. And the students seem to like it. And unfortunately, I have fantastic students. So that helps.
That's terrific. So then we get to the summer. We survive the spring. Everyone takes a deep breath. And you find out that we're going to be remote in the fall. So there's a difference, right, between emergency remote teaching where we just, and being a little more intentional about it. What did you change in the summer?
Yeah, wow, that's such a great question. So I remember vividly being outside, watering my plants and listening to a podcast about online teaching, right? We were all going through the same problem last summer, and the same around the country and around the world, these enormous challenges. So the biggest challenge I have had is figuring out how to conduct valid learning assessments when in a remote learning environment. And it has been, we all know it, I suspect, right? And we were talking about this even today in our faculty meeting. A couple of professors mentioned, this as an issue. It's a huge issue because our traditional assessments, don't work because the students just look up the answers. Even if we use like a browser lockdown or something, they just take their phone and look up the answers. And if students are cheating, we have big problems. It's one thing to have it happen for a semester, but we can't go on, right, with this kind of thing on a permanent basis. It's just a huge problem. I've had students call me in frustration because we're penalizing the honest students who don't cheat if we make it easy to cheat. So I just have decided that I'm not going to have those kind of tests where students can cheat easily. So, and I was listening to this podcast for that reason. And it was a podcast about how to, about authentic assessments, and it was absolutely fascinating. And so I've tried to implement some of those techniques in class. It's time consuming. Obviously it's just a whole different way of assessing learning, but there's a lot to be said for it because the exams become a learning process rather than just an assessment. So that's an advantage too. I could give you a couple of examples if you would like. Would that be helpful? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, for example, one of my courses last semester, I implemented interviews. I interviewed each student, 25 students in the class. I interviewed them and I had them show me. I gave them a problem that they had to do in SPSS. And I had them share their screen and show me. So it was impossible for them to cheat. And that worked really well. I gave all of the work that I was questioning them on was work that they had done for homework. So they should have known how to do it. So it worked, that worked well. I also do things like this semester in my consumer behavior course. I designed, and in some of my other courses, I've written case studies, my own case studies. I wrote I used some of the ideas for discussion questions from the textbook. Okay, I've taken some of those where they actually have to go off and find examples of problems that marketers have had, or challenges, things that consumers might do, or the ways they might respond to advertisements. So I've had them go off as part of the exam and find examples. So, and write about them and write about why these examples demonstrate what they're what these concepts are. And that is, the reason I say I think it's worked pretty well is because I see a dispersion in the grades, and they're not all getting A's. And so I think it's been working pretty well.
How have the students responded? I think this is wonderful. I am so happy listening to you. How did your students respond?
So obviously a big challenge is with a multiple choice exam, it's pretty black and white, okay? You know, if a student gets a C or an F or whatever they get, right? It's pretty black and white why they got it. And it's kind of hard to argue, right? But these assessments are much more objective. So that's the biggest challenge I find, is having to sometimes, you know, justify to the students, which they deserve, why they got the grade they did. And it's more subjective. So I have no idea, my course evaluations may go down this semester. I don't know. But, you know, hopefully, I'll let you know at the end of the semester.
Please do. I'm going to circle back. There's other things you can do as part of the assessment, like giving students rubrics up front to show them how they'll be graded, or using transparent design to frame the assignment for them so they understand the purpose as well as the task, right? You're doing this because this is something you're likely to do in your first year of employment.
Yeah,
right? Something to make
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. To help, help them understand why. That's a very good point.
Yeah. As we move to a post-COVID world, or as we hope to move to a post-COVID world, do you think you'll keep any of these innovations? Which ones in particular?
Oh, so yeah, that's a great question. You know, I think about that all the time, about what is happening to our industry, what will happen to our industry. You know, everybody is struggling to address it right now. Provost Gonzalez recommended a book to some of us who are on the task force for online and continuing education, the advisory committee. And it's called Failure to Disrupt by Justin Reich at Harvard. And he documents decades of research that have shown that in spite of the huge promises of digital technologies, pedagogical improvements have been incremental. You know, not instantly transformative like, you know, many people had predicted. So he also shows that the students who benefit the most from online learning are those who are already the most educated. So I think that some of these things are going to be huge, continue to be huge challenges for higher education. The only good thing I can say is that hopefully it means we still have jobs for a long period of time, and it won't become too disruptive. But, you know, so in answer to your, you know, more specific, so that's a general thought, okay? In answer to your more specific question about what will I keep, you know, I do think that, you know, we were, one of the interesting things before the pandemic, one of the interesting trends was a move towards the flipped classroom. And so that's something that I think was, you know, happening already. And I think in a lot of ways through the pandemic, through digital learning, we can take advantage of that by, you know, recording snippets of lectures ahead of time, or, you know, having students prepare on digital discussion boards and things like that ahead of time. So those are the kinds of things that I think, you know, will probably stick around, is those kind of, you know, flipped, an accelerated move towards flipped learning.
What about your authentic assessments?
Oh, the authentic assessments. Oh my gosh, I have to think about that. I have to think about that. You know, probably some of them. Yes,
it's a much better way to do it, right?
Yeah,
because, I mean, it's authentic because it's authentic to the workplace.
Yeah. Yes. That's a really important point, Fran. I have not thought about that, and I think I'm sure I will keep some of them. I probably will also, though, keep some objective, boring, old school types of assessments, just because I think it's good to have a balance, you know, that for those students who really do not believe that that this was a fair grade, you know, they might believe it with a more traditional objective assessment. So probably a mix.
Anyone have any questions? Would anybody like to jump into the conversation?
I'd just like to thank you guys. These kinds of intimate conversations where you learn what somebody specific does, and Colleen and I teach the same thing. It's nice to hear what either an echo of what I do or something new that I can fold into my repertoire. So it's while this was a very short period of time, it's a very useful one. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, Ellie.
So I try to wrap up these conversations with recommendations. Is there a particular app or technology or tool that you think makes your teaching better or easier or improves student learning or streamlines preparation? Is there something you could recommend that people might not be familiar with?
So I don't know how innovative this is, but this is something that, but yes, I can tell you about something that that has made a difference, I think to me in my teaching. So a few years ago, here at New York Tech, a student wrote in one of my course evaluations that they believed I favored students who I had known from previous classes. And, I teach often. I have the same students in multiple classes, which of course, I always enjoy because I get to know them. But that to me was, not a comfortable feeling, and it made me, I was pretty unhappy to read that, and was stunned, really. And we all like to believe that we'd never be biased in any of our assessments of students, or that we're biased at all in our lives, right? In general. But I study consumer psychology, and my job is to study cognitive biases. So I knew that it is possible that I am biased or was biased, even, it is possible, okay, that I was biased, even though I didn't think so, okay? But also in marketing, we say that it doesn't matter what the marketer thinks. What matters is the consumer's perception of reality that influences their judgment. So it doesn't matter what I thought or if I was biased or not. What mattered was that the student thought that I was biased. So after that, I thought about it, okay, and I had decided I looked into anonymous grading in Blackboard at the time and now Canvas. So, now I have implemented, since that time, I have implemented that in as much as possible with every assignment I possibly can. So exams, whatever they're submitting, everything that gets submitted, can be submitted online, gets graded anonymously. So, and that way, I know when I'm grading that I'm not biased, okay? And the students know that I'm not biased. So they submit their work with no name on it, and the grades are not revealed to me or to the students until all of the grading is done. And then the grade gets matched up with the student. And that way, no, that's it.
Do you ever do peer grading? So in other words, let them evaluate each other's work?
Oh, that's a great idea. Ellie, is that Ellie asking?
It is.
Yes. Yeah. No, I have not done that, but that would be an excellent tool. And actually, that is something that has been on my list to kind of, try out one of these times. Yep.
That's one of the things that that someone suggested I implemented. It seemed to work quite well because actually they're harder on each other than I am on them.
Great point, Ellie. Wonderful point. It's a really good idea. Yep.
Is there anything I should have asked you that I haven't?
I don't think so. I just, want to say how grateful I am to all of my fellow faculty members at New York Tech. I learned so much from all of you, okay? And, some of these things that I've attended, John Mizak, I've got to give him a call out because he's so amazing, right? Some of the way he uses technology in his courses. My colleagues in the School of Management, Deborah was using Zoom for teaching on a snow day, before all of us. and So we just have we have a great group of faculty and a fantastic Center for Teaching and Learning. And I also want to give a call out to Amy Bravo because she participated in your workshop at the Center of Teaching for Teaching and Learning, you know, a few years ago that I attended, and I learned an enormous amount from that workshop and from Amy, who was in my group and helping us all out quite a bit. So really, that's all.
Amy is pretty phenomenal. So,
Yes,
Colleen,
indeed.
I can't thank you enough for spending time with us today and sharing some of your practices.
Totally a
I'm
privilege,
going to
everybody.
circle back to you and keep talking with you, I know. And
Great.
all of our participants, thank you so much for joining us today. We've been speaking with Colleen Kirk, Associate Professor in Management and Marketing Studies in the School of Management, as part of the Great Teaching Series. This conversation's been recorded, and we will make it available on the Center for Teaching and Learning webpage, nyit.edu/CTL. If you'd like to be featured in the Great Teaching Series, please email the Center for Teaching and Learning at ctl@nyit.edu, or better yet, please fill out the form at bit.ly/great-teaching. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thanks.